expand the sign-off process for approval of expenditures of the foundation funds as needed. We recommended that the director or the deputy director be added to the sign-off process, and Ed, our deputy director, has been added to that sign-off process, which means now we have another layer of review and approval before any foundation funds can be spent. And that was just one of the recommendations approved. The other one was, as we went through and were reviewing historical information, we found that there were 2 employees, former employees, still on the credit union's list that approved to write checks. That was Marty Fredrickson and Dave Neal. We asked the board for approval to remove those people from that list and to add replacements. We did make that change. Ed and Kelly are now, Kelly Taylor and Owen, we'll talk about Kelly in a minute, have been added to that list. We also have 2 employees in financial management that have oversight and review authority, but not sign-off authority, so they can review the transactions, but they don't have the authority to sign off, and they're the ones that actually do the review and maintain the information. The third one was we had asked the board for $50 from the foundation to start to solve the problem that's been going on for, I think, 7 years or some ridiculous number. Employees periodically, not often, maybe 3 to 5 times a year, lose their ID badge, and in the past they had to pay for that, and that had been a problem for an ongoing problem for quite a while. We went to a process where we're going to reimburse the employee. We took the $50 out to set up a petty cash fund to do that. If that fund needs to be replenished, we'll use other funds to replenish it. So just reporting back that the board approved that, and we did get that done. We also asked if the board had any additional information or changes in reports that they'd like to see. I haven't gotten any feedback from anyone that they'd like to see additional information or the information that they do get changed. But again, I'll make that offer. If anybody wants to see the reports presented in different ways or additional information, please let us know. We can accommodate. In the last meeting, we gave an update on the foundation. Apparently it's been the first update on the foundation for a number of years. I don't know how long, but in that report, what we tried to do is bring the board up to speed. So we gave a financial update through 6/30 of 10, that fiscal year end, and then 6/30/11 fiscal year end through that point, which was March 30. So today I'm going to finish out the 6/30/11 year, which is that April 1st to June 30th, and then give you a brief update on where we are on the next fiscal year, which started on July 1st, and that information will be now. There are 2 accounts basically in the foundation. One is called S4 account. It was originally identified for conferences, but it has been used in other ways. And then the second one is S2, which is monument. In the last quarter of 2011, we had minimal activity. In the S4 account, we had interest in $66, and then we had the $50 that we paid out for the petty cash fund. That left the balance in that fund at $29,725. In the S1 account, we had no transactions other than minor interest income of $4. And the balance on that is $3,357. So far in fiscal year 12, in the S4 account, we had 3 expenditures related to the IWD booth at the state fair. Primarily, one of them was for the booth was manned by volunteers from IWD, so those volunteers had their state fair entrance and parking fees reimbursed. And then there were some merchandise, I think they're called IWD pins, that were handed out, and we paid for those. We also had an annual HR Certification Institute fee that we paid, the combination of those 4 transactions was about a little over $5,533. Those are the only transactions so far in that for that S4 account. That brought the balance at the end, well, as of September 22nd, down to $23,441. And in the S1 account, there were no transactions. That balance remains at $3,000. So briefly, that's kind of an overview of the foundation accounts as they exist today, and all of the transactions happen. Any questions on that?
Any revenue sources besides interest?
No. Not that I've seen. I've been here. Actually, I had this marks about 1 year. My first board meeting was 1 year ago,
And you've done a fine job.
I have not seen any transactions like that since I've been here. All right. Well, that was this. Oh, sure. Yes. Yep.
Okay. I would entertain a motion to approve the foundation financial report.
So moved.
Thank you, Ken. Second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Jean. Hearing no other questions, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
The next part, and again, these are hopefully they're in your packet. The next items that I'm going to cover are most board reports we give year-to-date updates on the budget. At this particular board meeting, we give a status on the next on the state fiscal year budget preparation. And before I start, I want to be remiss. For the new members, Kelly Taylor is our bureau chief of financial management. Kelly's and his staff work tirelessly and do an excellent job on preparing the budgets and the financial reports. And Kelly's been with the state for 30 years, so he has a wealth of information and knowledge.
30 years.
He reminds me regularly when it's 30 years up. And I just want to the board, compliment Kelly for all his years of service and all of the efforts and all of the expertise that he brings to the table. He does an excellent job. And I feel much more comfortable coming to the board meeting with him. Some general comments. September is probably the busiest month of the year for IWD financial management. There are a lot of things going on in September. Annually, the state requires a GAAP financial report, which is due in September. September 15th is approximately the date every year that the previous fiscal year has to be closed out on the state books. The state requires the initial budget submission for the next fiscal year in by September 30th. And it's when we start to work earnestly on preparing for the next year, the federal budget. So it's a very busy month, and financial management is pretty much strained to the edge. But what I'd like to go through is a little bit on where we're at on the state fiscal year 13, and just touch on what we know in the federal budget. And in your packet, you'll see the report. It's kind of the standard monthly report. We kind of went to using this. It has 3 different reports in it, and they're all different colors. The first report is a report that shows funding by source and over a 3-year period. So it's the blue report. And I'll just walk through this one a little bit with you so you understand what you're looking at. This report, IWD is an interesting department in that it has such a mix of funding and programs that run through it. It's heavily funded by the federal government, and if you look at DHS and the federal funds in total, it's well in excess of 80% of our funding comes from the federal government. And actually, that percentage is going up, not because the federal government is giving us more money. In fact, they're giving us less money. potentially a lot less money. But it's because the other funding sources are also declining. So that share that becomes federal is actually increasing, although the money's not going up. And on this report, what you'll see is 3 years of funding by source and expenses. And I think the major thing to take away from this is that if you look at 2011, 2012, and 2013, what you'll see is a significant and rapid decline in the amount of funding from all sources. And I just really don't know that I have much other to add than that. It's just basically the fact that our revenue has dropped significantly. In fact, if you would look at from a federal perspective, funding drops about 36%, state funding drops about 37%. What we have under the other category, that drops about 60%. And the reason why that drop is so significant is there's an account that in the past we've relied fairly heavily on called the UI Interest Revolving Fund. And that in the past has generated up to $6.5 million. This year we're projecting about $232,000. So that's why you see that large percentage drop. That is solely and totally based on the interest rates that fund earns. And as you know, if you look at your 401ks, you look at whatever you want to look at, interest accounts are not paying much. That has really hurt. That has hurt this fund significantly.
Would you give that the percent drop on Fed and state?
Yes. Between 2011 and 2013, federal funding down 36%, state funding 37%, and what we group into other. Now, other is only about 5% of the total, but that's down 60%. So an overall aggregate drop of 38% over that 3-year period.
And part of the good news, bad news story on federal funds, many of them anyway, is that while it's good and bad news that our unemployment rate is hovering around 6%, we're of course the 8th lowest in the country right now. And so if you look at a country perspective, we're doing pretty well. But then the problem with that is, of course, that 6% goes into a lot of the formulas that the Fed used to deploy money back to a lot of services. So instead of the 12 or 13 or 15%, some other states will have to get more funding. We're going to be getting less funding because we're at 6%. So it's a challenge to be able to continue some of our programs because the federal funding will be low.
The next report I want to go through, and I'm really going to go through these and then open it up to questions, is there's a report that's in yellow, and I think this report is interesting to me because, before we get first again, this is a report that shows 3 years. It also shows the various programs and their expenses and revenues for that 3-year period. And I think one of the things that, when I came to the state was the unusual aspect that when you talk about a budget, you're really not talking about one budget. You're talking about 36 budgets because each of these programs has a revenue stream and an expense stream, and then each one of them has certain rules and regulations that are attached to that program. So it's really kind of a very complex sort of thing to manage. Again, you'll see that when you include DHS, 23 out of the 36 programs are federally funded for our state, and then there are 9 in others. And I'm kind of using the program a little bit loosely, but in general concept, that's what it is it's a program and funding streams follow that. In this one, we've also added a column on the right hand that shows a projected surplus or deficit by program and funding for that program. And you'll see those on the right hand column. The last report in purple to me, I guess, Again, this information is really the same information on all three reports, it's just kind of cast in different ways. Again, it's a 3-year snapshot. It shows the amount of expenses in FTEs by division. And IWD is organized in different divisions, so within that there are different work functions, and it shows the amount of money by activity in there, and then the FTEs. Again, it's primarily, I suppose the most important thing is the FTE information on this one. But it gives you, again, it gives you an idea, it gives you information about those things. From a state perspective, we built our budget to be submitted actually October 3rd this year because the first falls on a weekend. Using status quo, same direction that we had last year when we built the budget. The only change we made was we incorporated the actual interest income off the UI revolving fund rather than the plug number of whatever the number was. 4.29. But we thought it was important to highlight that there is no way that that fund is going to generate $4.2 million. In fact, we get quarterly statements. I don't know what the interest rate was.
0.2%.
So we're estimating it's going to be $232,000. So we thought it's a critical thing, and we thought it was important to recognize that difference. The federal budget, I don't really have a whole lot to say about that other than we have pieces that we know. There's a UI base funding amount that we know. We'll use what we know when we build it. We also look at trends of how interim payments come out during the year and how those interim payments are trending up or down. And if we don't know, if we don't have information, or if we don't see a trend or have information on trends, we use status quo. And that's how we put together the federal budget. We are in the process right now of working through that and implications. We're having meetings with department heads and looking at scenarios to say, if it turns out the way we're projecting right now, what can we do? And that's going to go on for a while.
We are also participating with a number of organizations and a number of states to try to save or try to express our interest in keeping things like the 15% discretionary funding. Right now, they took that out of, we have put it into 5% level, and then put this 10% into an innovation fund that the federal government has flexibility over instead of the states. And so we have gone to each of our representatives, and I've written letters asking to give that flexibility back to the state instead of keeping it at a federal level. And so we continue to do what we can with each one of our legislators in trying to express the uniqueness that each state has, and so the state really needs to have the flexibility to use those dollars in our state programs. But as you all know, Washington is kind of in a turmoil right now. In the next few months, we'll find out what exactly they end up doing in the budget process.
So with that, I throw it open for questions.
As we get information, I'll be sure, I think, I've been starting to send out monthly updates and that sort of things to folks, and if we get something that's in the interim that's more reflective of some dollar funding or some different funding than what we think, I will be getting that out to each one of you on an interim basis, but certainly in my monthly updates, I'll be sure to include those kinds of things.
And I'd also echo on that too, kind of a similar thing. If there are suggestions you have on how you'd like to see the information portrayed, or if you have questions, just let us know. We struggle with how the best way to present it so that it's detailed enough to understand what's going on, but high level enough so that you don't get lost in the numbers. And it's, because it is a rather confusing sort of process to go through and try to analyze where you're at. So if you have anything that you'd like to see that you're not getting, please let us know.
Well, just a question of, in the 2-year budgeting that the governor was promoting, do you have a target in that second year that you're working on?
We have an 85% target, which is what, generally speaking, got through the legislature, and of course, we're working towards others that we don't have yet, but we don't have that information to be able to, I mean, we don't have the information period yet, so. Kelly has been our formula fellow to help us do that.
Yeah, on the promised jobs line item in 2013, where are you showing a $6.7 million surplus in that line item?
Promise jobs, lots of data. The promise jobs budget right now is just built based on what we know we're going to be doing for 2013, and there are other factors that we don't know yet, that haven't been determined yet. And that money then is just listed as being unobligated funds at this point in time, until a final decision is made on what's going to happen with that money. Will it be subcontracted out? Will be additional staff come on board? Will there be a change in duties for existing staff? None of that's been decided yet, so in this particular report, it's just listed as unobligated money.
But the anticipated
Until something
revenue
is decided.
But the anticipated revenue in that line item is
Yes,
anticipated to be
yes,
14.5.
it's just because it's not obligated yet. I had the same question, and so generally speaking, I can say we're gonna spend the $6 million on promised jobs that you see as unobligated, but because we don't have the 28Es and the contracts done for 2013, it has to go into this other buffer column.
You see the same thing if you look at the Trade Act program and there, or the WAC Advisor program, they've got unobligated funds too. Obviously, they still have to be used for Trade Act related purposes or WAC Advisor related purposes, but as of this particular point in time, it's not been obligated yet.
So I assume that ties back into your decision-making right now in terms of whether or not to have subcontract agreements or not, or whether to pull all of that back.
Yeah,
into the
it will be
department.
part of that analysis that we're gonna do for the next 6 or 8 months, and individually with each region, and that hooks in the, I think each region will be different in how they will be delivering their promised jobs to their region, and so we'll go through that analysis and work through it with their folks. That's the money source for them.
Right.
And then we would work on a percentage of 2013's budget for 2014 as a projection.
Correct, and we would probably be 14 and 15 together, in about 6 months, it gets a 2-year cycle, and so, yeah, we'll be bringing that to you in about number 6 months or so. After we get through this one and we get into a more definitive definition in 2013, then we'll bring you 14 and 15.
Good.
The 2013 budget is probably pretty much be guaranteed will change at least a dozen times between now and next spring. I mean, if this year is anything like last year, we didn't even know what our final federal awards were until January, I believe it was. And so then they become retroactive funding at that point.
Yeah.
There's only a couple of grants at this point in time that we could say with any confidence what the federal grant amount's going to be. The rest of them, again, like Paul was saying, all we do is go with our best estimate, which is either status quo or look at trends from the past. We have several pots of money that, by the trends, show us that the funding is dropping every quarter, and so I've got to make that kind of projection for 2013. It's going to continue to drop.
And the stimulus money is basically spent out.
Yeah.
So,
As is the interest money off our fund.
Yeah.
That fund.
One other thing that I would add is that the comment always comes up about whether offices should stay open or whether offices could close. I look at it strictly from a financial standpoint, and what I see in the last 3 or 4 years is that just 3 years ago we had over $20 million available in either interest funds or state appropriations for field offices. I've got $9 million available in 2013. Something has to give. Just from a financial standpoint, something has to give. And on the unemployment grants, just 3 years ago, we received over $50 million in unemployment funds. Now, that money supports field offices and Mike's division. I'm looking at $27 million in 2013. The feds are good, notorious at giving a lot of one-time money to states, saying, here's an extra $10 million, hire more staff and take care of the unemployed people. And then they immediately, kind of a year later, they turn the spigot back off and say, okay, we're done. And so those are the kind of big issues that we're facing: a dramatic drop in federal funds, a dramatic drop in state funds, and a revolving account interest fund that isn't doing anywhere near as good as it was doing just 3 or 4 years ago when it did earn $5 or $6 million. Now looking at $232,000. It's not going to support much.
So the FTE drop that we saw for 2013, a lot of that is tied to the stimulus monies that pays for those
It's the right.
workers in that interim.
Right.
And now, quote, we're all fixed and we don't need that money.
Right.
And we had a lot of retirements just a year ago that we cannot fill those positions. And so you see a higher level position in 2011 when before those people actually took retirement. Now you back out those people that took retirement, you back out the fact that there's a lot of positions we just can't afford any longer. And you see 100, 200 some positions less now.
Well, thank you for the news, and that's what I especially appreciate.
It wasn't quite as uplifting as the.
We need Greer up now. Come on, Greer. Okay. And you don't need approval of that. That was just a report. Okay. Moving right along.